So await terminers, and welcome to the second section of the Prose GCSE literature. This continues directly on from the previous section, wherein Polo, one of Caesar's centurions in Quintus Cicero's camp, is in a bit of an awkward spot, being somewhat surrounded by his enemies outside of the walls. So, literally, the scutum for Poloni, the shield for Polo, is transfigatur, and the veretum, a dart, is defigatur into his belt. Notice the repetition of the core verb here with different prefixes. Hic casus, this event, averted, turned aside his vaginam, his scabbard, and morator delays his dexteram manum, his right hand, literally for the man trying, conanti, to educere his gladium, to draw his sword. Incidentally, if you are looking at that word vaginam, which might be pronounced somewhat differently in English, you might also be able to think about what the word gladius might be slang for in Rome. Anywho, the hostes circumsistent stood around the impeditum man, the impeded man. Sort of visual image of what might be going on here. A javelin has come through, and he's technically blocked it, but has gone straight through the wood and has pushed his scabbard to the side. Bit of a bad position for Polo. Speaking of javelins, the Romans would be using the pilum, which is a heavy javelin, sort of 2 meters long, which could even be used in close combat as a spear. There is a lively, for classicists, debate about whether or not the pilum was designed to bend. The general suggestion nowadays is probably not. Think about how annoying it would be to have to bend every spear back after every battle. It'd be a real pain. But there's some debate either way. Certainly going through a shield would be very viable because a javelin has a lot of mass behind it. Caesar uses the word veretum, which is a lighter javelin, which would be used by skirmishers to describe what's gone through Polo's shield. In general, he's talking about spears that are designed to be thrown. His inimicus Vorenus, his rival Vorenus, you can note that inimicus is the opposite of amicus, so it kind of means his not friend, can be translated as enemy, but here more clearly rival. Succurit, ran to his aid, illy being his in this instance. Strictly speaking, it's something like he ran to be of aid for that man, and he subvenit, gave help to the laboranti, gave help to the struggling or the working man. Quite a common phrase in Latin. The omnis multitudo, the whole crowd, the whole multitude, all the multitude, confessed him immediately, converted, redirected, or turned, say, themselves, ad hunc to this man Apollone, from Polo. They were arbitranturing, deponent verb, so they were thinking illum, that man, occisum, slain by the veretu, by the dart. This is fair. Javelins are short range, but have a lot of mass behind them, so they will go straight through most shields and armor. And Polo gets quite lucky that they hit his shield and pierce, but go to the side rather than going through him. If you're struggling to imagine what's going on here and why Vorenus and Polo are outside the walls, this is likely a quick attack to sort of emphasize the Roman bravery, to try to demoralize the enemy and to build up the morale of their own troops. Being under siege like this, particularly what is apparently a very unpleasant siege as described by Caesar, would be disheartening for the Romans, and they cannot afford to surrender because their fate would probably be quite unpleasant. Whether or not it's a good plan to run outside the walls and immediately have to be rescued, well, as the saying goes, it ain't stupid if it works. Vorenus, he gerit the rem. Literally something like waged the matter, carried on the fight. Comminus, literally with hands together at close quarters with his sword. And with uno interfecto, with one slain as an adjective absolute, he propellet, he drove forwards, or in this case back, because he drove them away from him, the reliquos paulum, he drove back the rest a little. While he was instatting Cupidius, whilst he was following literally more eagerly, but here definitely the sense is too eagerly, he concedit, he slipped into a locum inferiorem, into a lower spot, dejectus, having been thrown off balance. Not entirely clear what's happened here, but Roman camps had ditches around them, so it may well be the fact that Vorenus, who is sort of killed the first Gaul coming up to him with his sword, and has sort of driven the rest of them, he's now chasing them, trying to get some more of them. He's like slipped into a ditch. This is pretty bad. So dramatically, Polo fert subsidium brings, technically, but brought help subsidium to Huic, to this man, circumvento Rursus. Circumvento surrounded Rursus again. And with compluribus, complures, so several, interfectis slain, they ambo, both, recipiunt, withdrew sesse themselves, in columnes, literally unharmed, and translated here as an adverb, safely, intra munitiones, within the fortifications, which you could reasonably contrast here to extra munitiones in the first section, with cum summa laude, with the highest honour. As it says here, summa cum laude is a phrase you may know. It's used in American universities to mean with the highest praise. Sic fortuna versavit, thus fortune literally turned, but treated, utrumque, them both, in their contentione and curtamen, in their dispute and competition. Ut, so that alter inimicus, the one rival, esset, was, literally for the auxilio and saltutique, for the help or the aid and safety for the other. And neque posset, it could not be diudicari, distinguished as a passive infinitive, uta, which of the two, videretur, seemed anteferendus, translated here as preferable, to the other in courage. Notice here that Caesar is deliberately repeating vocabulary from the first section, anteferendus and diudicari, where previously they were saying hic dies will judicabit, this day will decide. So he's deliberately repeating vocabulary to emphasize that this competition between the two of them is being answered. They're both as brave as each other because they're both just such excellent soldiers, because Caesar is the best of all commanders, and therefore when he comes back to Rome you should support him, O Roman citizens, listening to this. So there you have it, section 2. Very much should be read in conjunction with section 1. The two sections follow directly on from each other in Caesar's original text, and often repeat vocabulary and sentence structure from the previous section in order to emphasize the bravery of Vorenus and Polo, and how their rivalry actually inspires the two of them to greater deeds of heroism. Regardless of whether or not it's a particularly good plan to run outside the walls and what could have obviously gone wrong. They are, however, in a tricky situation, and Caesar is therefore emphasizing how excellent his soldiers are even when the chips are down. Hope that helps. Thank you very much.